What's up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So before I get right into today's video, I want to tell you guys thank you 1,000,000 times over from the absolute bottom of my heart. We hit 300,000 subscribers the other day. I'm trying to not get crazy emotional. I spent all of yesterday, which is technically the day that I hit 300,000, which will be days ago for you, just like violently shaking because it was so incredibly unreal to me, you guys. I've been, creating this content for 2 years now, and I have grown so fast, so much faster than I ever expected. And it's just still absolutely wild to me that 300,000 people support what I do, support this kind of cause. OG subscriber tweeted me the other day, and it was in an old conversation we had been having off of the fact that I think I hit like a couple thousand, maybe like 13,000 or just something along those lines, subscribers. And it was interesting because what I said on my tweet was, just when I thought I'd lost faith in all of the world, 13,000 people showed up to show me that they have the biggest heart. And I'm going to try not to get crazy emotional for like the millionth time. That is genuinely how I feel about my channel, you guys. And I know everyone's going to make fun of me because I'm always crying in all of my videos, but we talk about a lot of dark stuff, and my head is constantly in negativity and things that are scary and realities that I never want to become my own, and, people's heartache and pain. And it was interesting because when I first started this, I really thought, no one's going to watch this because no one cares about other people, I feel like the same way that I did. And it was a really disheartening feeling. And then to see how big this channel has grown and to see how many of you genuinely care, it's the truth. I had really lost a lot of faith in a lot of the people around me at the time, and a lot of people's lack of empathy was really starting to get to me. But you guys showed me and proved to me every single day that there are people out there that are amazing, that care about other people the way that I do, that want to make a difference, that understand other people go through hard times, and there are things that you can do to help them. And it's just awesome. And to hit that gigantic number of 300,000 is just mind-boggling to me, and I will forever be thankful and grateful and appreciative of every single one of you guys. And I hope that you all know that. I wish I could give each and every one of you the biggest hug possible, because this whole channel would not be possible without you guys. You guys have drastically changed my life in ways that I cannot even begin to explain to you. So thank you, just thank you. I had to go and fix my makeup because it was just, pouring off of my face, because apparently I'm overly emotional all the time on the internet. But yeah, so thank you guys so much. I love every single one of you. Wouldn't be here without you, period, ever, point blank. You guys make my world turn. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and jump right on into today's video. And today's video is very interesting because it's a mixture of kind of all the topics that I go over on this channel, which you don't often find. It's a very unique set of circumstances, and it's incredibly heartbreaking. And this is the story about the Blagg family. And in particular, I really want to put a lot of emphasis on a 6-year-old girl that went missing in 2001 named Amy Jo Blagg. She was the only daughter of Michael and Jennifer Blagg. In 2001, Abby Jo Blagg was 6 years old, and she was living in the 2200 block of Pine Terrace Court in the Redlands, just west of Grand Junction, Colorado. As I said before, she lived with her mother, Jennifer Blagg, and her father, Michael Blagg. They had just moved from South Carolina. They were actually a family that moved quite often. I think in 10 years they moved anywhere from like 4 to 6 states. I can't remember the exact places. I think it was like Texas and Arizona, and then there was South Carolina. Then they moved to Colorado, and they had only been in Grand Junction, Colorado for about 10 months before a huge fiasco happened. Michael was the operations director of a company named Amatech, and Jennifer was a stay-at-home mom, and she was really, really active in her daughter's life. From the outside, they appeared to be like the ideal family. Jennifer always volunteered at Abby's school, always helped out with things like, PTA, and she spent the rest of her time working out and really practicing her religion, which was a huge, huge part of her life. Everyone that knew the couple said that the family was very reclusive, but they were always incredibly kind, and it was very, very obvious that they all really loved each other. Michael would always rush home from work if he was needed at home. He was always seen cheering on his daughter. For instance, when she was learning to ride a bike, he was just running alongside her and cheering her on. He taught her how to ski at a young age. He used like a hula hoop to keep her close to him. They were just a really active family. They did a lot of things together and they really supported each other. But this seemingly perfect and happy family had a very tragic ending that pretty much nobody expected. On November 12th, 2001, the family had a fairly average day. At around 7 p.m., 6-year-old Abby went to bed as she normally did. She always laid her clothes out for school the next day. Her mom always put her book bag in the hallway, made sure she did her homework. And after Abby went to bed, both Jennifer and Michael stayed up for a little while. Jennifer ended up having a phone call with a friend at around 8 p.m. that night. They spoke about possibly meeting for lunch the next day. And then around 10 p.m., Jennifer and Michael headed to bed. And according to Michael, the rest of the night was incredibly quiet. The following morning, Michael woke up pretty early, and I think he left between 5:30 and 6 in the morning to go to work. And Jennifer and Abby were still sleeping in the house. And this is the last time that he ended up seeing his daughter and his wife. He usually called throughout the day to check on Jennifer, and this day was absolutely no different. He called at around 7 a.m. I'm assuming that's maybe when he got to work. He called again at 10 a.m., but both of these phone calls went straight through to voicemail. And then at lunchtime, he called again, but oddly enough, there was still no answer. And then finally at 3 p.m., Michael called Jennifer's cell phone and left a voicemail saying that he was a little bit concerned that she wasn't calling him back or answering any of his phone calls. And at this point, Michael headed home. Now, not necessarily because he thought anything was wrong, it was just his time to go home. But something definitely was not right, because when he arrived home at around 4 p.m., there was absolutely no sign of Abby or Jennifer in the home. But what was in the house was an obvious, brutal crime scene. The mattress in the master bedroom was covered in a very large amount of blood, and it appeared as if the contents of Jennifer's purse had just been thrown all over the entire room. By 4:20, Michael was calling authorities to tell them that there was something seriously wrong. His wife and his daughter were missing, and it was very likely that foul play was involved. Authorities rushed to the scene and they immediately shut the entire house down. They closed everything off because, again, it was an obvious crime scene, and they immediately started to question Michael. So Michael told authorities all about the day before, about that morning, that Jennifer wasn't answering her phone the whole entire day, and he said he also never once imagined anything was really wrong. He assumed maybe she was just busy, or she didn't have her phone on her, or she wasn't in the house, maybe she went to this lunch and got caught up, but he never in his wildest dreams thought that something could have potentially happened to his wife and his daughter. Authorities decided to check the school that Abby went to see if they had any information. They were trying to get a timeline of when everything might have conspired, and they ended up finding out that Abby never even made it to school that day. So whatever happened to Abby and Jennifer must have happened right after Michael left and right before Abby was meant to go to school. Based on the amount of blood, it was fairly obvious that someone was at the very least incredibly, incredibly injured, more than likely deceased, but they couldn't really say for sure. At this point, they weren't sure if it was just a mixture of Abby and Jennifer's blood or if it was just, from one person. So they couldn't for sure say what was really going on with either. So both Abby and Jennifer were just listed as missing persons. Authorities at this point are trying to figure out what the heck happened, because none of this originally was making pretty much any sense. They started to wonder if this was a planned attack. Maybe someone had been targeting both Jennifer and Abby. Maybe someone had been targeting just one of them. It was incredibly early in the morning, and there was such a short time frame from the time that Michael left to go to work and Abby had to go to school that it would have been a huge coincidence for someone to show up at that time. They checked Jennifer's journals to maybe see if she mentioned having any issues, maybe if she mentioned someone was following her or treating her oddly. Her journals were pretty much only filled with biblical references and nothing more, so there was literally nothing left behind to suggest that maybe someone had been following Jennifer or Abby. The family also didn't seem to have any enemies. As I said before, they had a handful of friends, but they were very, very reclusive. And authorities obviously immediately went to question everyone surrounding them, and everyone that knew them pretty much loved them. So they also wanted to rule out the possibility that this might have been a robbery gone wrong. But according to Michael, not a single thing from the house appeared to be stolen. The only odd thing that might have pointed to a robbery was the fact that Jennifer's purse had been thrown all across the room. On top of that, if this had just been a burglary gone wrong, why would this person then, harm both Abby and Jennifer, maybe just one of them, and then take their bodies or take them wounded and obviously severely bleeding? You would assume they would just hurt them, attempt to kill them, and run. It wouldn't make sense for them to go in with intentions of robbery, end up killing or really harming someone, and then kidnapping them. It's just that's a lot deeper than something they might have gone there to do, and that's not really something that's common. That does not mean it's impossible. It just wasn't as likely. So then there was also the possibility that maybe they did end up getting hurt from someone and maybe they tried to go to a hospital for help. But when all the hospitals and everything were checked, there was still absolutely no sign of Abby or Jennifer anywhere. It was just such an odd scene that fit multiple scenarios, just not fully enough to really give them a good direction to go in. Authorities immediately started to conduct searches. They interviewed all of the neighbors. They started interviewing the church members because the Blagg family went to church every single Sunday. They even spoke to landscaping crews that had been working in the area around the time that Abby and Jennifer possibly disappeared or something possibly happened to them inside the home. They brought in dogs to maybe track a scent from the home to wherever Abby and Jennifer might have been taken or gone. But it all seemed unsuccessful. They started to also send people to search along the Colorado River. There were a bunch of trails in that area, I think about a quarter mile to a half mile from their home. And oftentimes Jennifer would take Abby on these trails. They would go on walks, but still there was absolutely no sign of them. Time was really of the essence here, not just because it's incredibly important to try to find someone within the first 48 hours of their disappearance, but because of the amount of blood, one of them, if not both of them, was severely injured and or on the verge of death, if not already dead. So it was just such a crazy situation, but authorities were really conflicted on what was going on and what to do. An anonymous female caller ended up calling the police station multiple times right after both Jennifer and Abby went missing. And this female caller said that she actually saw the family's minivan around Park Ridge, Colorado, the day of the disappearance. But authorities, for some reason, didn't really look too deep into this at first. The family's van had been parked at home when Jennifer and Abby were reported missing. I have not been able to find out if Michael had his own car or if that specific minivan was the only family car. But then they got a huge tip that ended up taking the investigation in an entirely different, unexpected direction. Jennifer and Abby's faces had been all over the media, and an employee from Colorado Legal Services in Grand Junction, Colorado, recognized Jennifer. The employee stated that just days before the disappearance, Jennifer showed up and was pretty much very frazzled and hysterical, and she claimed that her husband, Michael Blagg, was abusing her, and she was incredibly frightened of him. She said that she needed to get a divorce as soon as humanly possible, but unfortunately, there was not an attorney that could see her at the time, so she again became incredibly hysterical and ran out of the office. Authorities at this point started turning their eyes toward Michael. He was the last one to see both Abby and Jennifer that morning, and also the one to stumble upon this scene. Now, that in no way makes somebody guilty, but it was interesting that just days before, Jennifer was attempting to get a divorce from him, and then all of a sudden, both Jennifer and Abby are missing. By the end of November, authorities decided to place Michael under surveillance. Now, at this point, they had not named him a person of interest, I think, or even a suspect, none of the above, but they definitely were starting to question a lot of his story. In December, just a month after the disappearance, Michael suddenly decided to move out of the family home, and he claimed it was just far too difficult for him to be in the home without having his wife and his daughter, and there was still a giant bloodstain in the home that was just a constant reminder. So he started publicly looking for condos and houses that would fit 3 people. And he also was making it a point to publicly speak out a lot about the family and what he was doing. It was nearing Christmas time, and he publicly announced that he had still bought both Jennifer and Abby a whole bunch of Christmas presents, that they were sitting under his Christmas tree. He was really appearing to be a grieving father and husband, and it upset a lot of people. A lot of people felt terrible for this man, and it was very obvious he was hurting. He was still buying them Christmas presents without knowing if they'd be home. He was still looking for homes for them. But some people were starting to kind of see holes in his reaction to their disappearance, and a lot of people that had originally strongly defended him kind of started stepping back a little bit. The same month, authorities were able to announce that the family's 2000 Ford Windstar had in fact more than likely been used in whatever crime occurred in the house that day. They believed that it was used to transport both Abby and Jennifer from the home, because after forensic testing, they found trace amounts of Jennifer's blood in a lot of different places on the car. It was on the exterior of the car, on the interior of the car, it was found on the steering wheel, it was found on the brake pedal, the driver's side door handle, and also the door in the back, the kind of sliding door. And because it was found kind of back in that location, it made authorities think someone carried her body in there and put her in. But at this point, all the blood that they had found from the house, from the car, all belonged to Jennifer. There was not a single sign at all that Abby had ever been injured in whatever happened. Michael appeared to be incredibly devastated and confused by this news, but he also made it clear when he was speaking about learning about this news that he was not happy being considered a possible suspect, and at the same time, he also offered up a $3,000 reward that the church they attended helped him raise. And this pretty much was a reward for any information leading them straight to Abby and Jennifer. But by January, Michael's behavior started getting interesting, to say the least, and he really started to change up his story and did not do himself any favors. It had been 2 months since his wife and daughter went missing, and all of a sudden he claimed randomly on the media one day that there had actually been a lot of jewelry belonging to Jennifer stolen from his home. And everyone was incredibly confused, from the public to the police officers, because Michael was asked to make sure nothing was stolen, and he said for sure nothing was stolen right when the authorities were checking. And this had been announced. This was leading them down a very different route, because it was not thought to be potentially a burglary as much as possibly something else. Now, this in itself wasn't incredibly odd, because maybe it just slipped his mind, or maybe he just so happened to remember pieces of jewelry that she had that were missing. That in itself just really wasn't anything to make him seem suspicious. But what was odd was that as soon as he let out this information, he pretty much stated that he believed his wife and daughter's disappearance was linked to a burglary gone wrong. He started bringing up a string of robberies that were happening in the Grand Junction area around the same time that both Jennifer and Abby disappeared. Now, while this is always a possibility, and I feel like I'm the kind of person that I would make a connection like that as well and publicly state it, it was just really odd to authorities that all of a sudden, out of the blue, 2 months later, he suddenly realizes all this jewelry is missing, and he also is trying to link it to, burglaries that were happening nearby, and he was really, really pushing this, and it almost seemed like he was trying to draw attention away from something else. And then Michael continued to kind of get himself into a deeper hole. He ended up being caught on camera stealing a shredder and a table from his job. I think it was about $500 worth of items collectively, and he was caught doing this because he was under surveillance. Authorities were watching him. And on top of that, the plant manager from where he worked had come forward to authorities saying that he had received complaints from 2 separate women that Michael had been following them. This was pretty much all authorities needed to bring Michael in and question him about his sketchy behavior, because at this point, his actions were very erratic and odd, and they really believed he might have had something to do with his wife and daughter's disappearance. He ended up going through 10 hours of an interview, and not just about the stolen items from his job. That's definitely something they questioned him about, but about this jewelry that he claimed was stolen. And he hadn't even, I think at this point, told police about the jewelry. He just randomly stated it while being interviewed by the media. And it was obvious he was very uncomfortable. After a few hours, authorities accused him of killing his wife and his daughter. And apparently, as soon as they did this, he broke down crying and said, "What will the penalties be for murder?" Authorities were thinking they were about to get a confession. Why would someone that is innocent ask what penalties be for a murder in a case that has not even been confirmed as a homicide? Shortly after these interviews with authorities, where they believed he was on the verge of admitting to murdering his wife and daughter, Michael attempted to take his life, and he left a note behind saying that he had no information whatsoever on the disappearance of Abby and Jennifer. The only reason he ended up being found was because authorities came back to question him again about the stolen items, and this is when they found him on the verge of death and took him to the hospital. It was about a week before he was finally recovered enough to be released and sent home. And as soon as he was released from the hospital, Michael was also announced as a possible suspect. Now, I want to make it clear again, they did not say he was a suspect. He was not formally labeled a suspect. They just said it was possible. Those close to Michael were absolutely furious because they said the reason he attempted to take his life is because authorities were accusing him of something that he didn't do. But then there was this other side, very similar to the story I told last week, where a lot of people believed the reason he did it was because he was guilty and he couldn't handle that. And unfortunately, that's not ever something that I think we will really know the truth about. But either way, his life went on as normal as possible. But by February, he had been fired from his job. Between following other women and stealing $500 worth of equipment, he was kicked to the curb. He hired an attorney since becoming a possible suspect and told everyone that he planned on getting another job and just moving forward with his life as best as he could. Authorities began to question all of Michael's family and friends, and I'm not just talking in Grand Junction. They went everywhere that the Blaggs had ever lived. I wanted to get to the bottom of this to see what on earth was going on in their marriage, because they knew from the legal office that Jennifer had claimed she was being abused by Michael, and she was scared of him. She was scared something was going to happen, but they needed some more evidence of this. And then by March of 2002, authorities officially announced that Abby and Jennifer were not just missing, but most likely were the victims of foul play. They decided to start more searches, and they began searching a 45-mile area around the family's home. And I think in about 11 or 12 days, they searched constantly. There were hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, but unfortunately, nothing significant was found in any of these searches. And then a tip from one of Michael's coworkers led them to more answers. A coworker came forward saying that the day of the disappearances, they saw Michael do something very odd and out of character for him. Michael had been pushing a pallet jack with 2 gigantic boxes on it. 2 of them. He went to throw the boxes away in the Amatec trash compactor, and the worker came up to him and asked if he needed any help at all getting the boxes in there, and Michael immediately shut them down and rushed them away. I can't remember the exact words that he said. I saw them quoted somewhere, but it was something along the lines of, like, get out of here, or just very aggressive, like, Leave. Do not come over here. Do not touch these boxes. Get away. So authorities decided the next best step because of this tip was to check the Mesa landfill where the trash from Applepie would have gone. Just 2 days after this search started, Michael disappeared from Colorado without informing police. Now, that's not illegal. He was not considered a suspect yet, but it was just very odd that as soon as this search started, he seemed to run. And then on June 5th, 2002, they ended up finding the remains of Jennifer Blagg along with other trash from Applepie Inc., where Michael had worked. So at this point, likely what was in the box, we know at least was Jennifer, and it was a pretty safe assumption to authorities that the second box held the remains of Abby. Unaware that he had been followed by authorities, Michael ended up being arrested in Georgia shortly after they were able to identify Jennifer's body. He had been hiding out with his mom, and he didn't think he was being followed, but again, they had him under surveillance, so they knew exactly where he was at, and he was charged with first-degree murder and brought back to Colorado for the trial. A forensic examination showed that Jennifer had more than likely been killed in her sleep. She was found with a retainer that she only wore at night, and she had been shot through her left eye, and I'm pretty sure that is what killed her. However, they still had not found Abby. Authorities desperately continued their search for 7 more weeks after they had found Jennifer's remains. They sifted through a few thousand tons of trash, but they never ever found a single sign of her. They decided to contact the anonymous woman that had reported seeing the family's car that day because they felt like maybe he had taken Abby somewhere else. And she told them that she saw the car on Little Park Road, which is basically a very long road that twists and turns through canyons, mountains, and basically just the absolute middle of nowhere. I obviously am going to have a map up to show you. It's the wilderness. It's the middle of nowhere. And this potentially could be where Abby might have been dumped if she was murdered. Now, I have not ever found anywhere if they did any searches in this location. Unfortunately, there is pretty much no information out there on what they've done for Abby in particular. When Jamie was found, it was almost like a lot of things stopped. And I know that's not fully the truth. I am sure they continue to search for Abby, but there's just nothing online to confirm this. There is no update online as to the most recent times things have been searched, where exactly they searched, which I find very unfortunate because while one answer was given to them, there is still this missing hole of where on earth this 6-year-old girl went. But in the moment, they were concerned about Jennifer's death and Michael's guilt. The affidavit ended up being released, and more wild details were released to the public about what exactly had been going on behind the scenes. While looking for more evidence to use against Michael while awaiting trial, they were led to the owner of a local escort business. According to the owner, Michael came in to the business multiple times a month to get massages from topless women. And they also found, I think, 1,300 pornographic images on his computer. It was obvious there were issues in the relationship, and when he was questioned about this, Michael ended up admitting that there were problems in their marriage, that at the very end of 2001, they were having a lot of issues, but he told them the massages and the pornographic images were just for research. Whatever the heck that means. It also released that authorities that had originally searched the house found signs that someone had tried to clean and mop up the blood that was in the home. So someone tried to cover up a little bit of something and then maybe realized it was way too much to cover up. In March of 2004, Michael's trial began and he was facing 4 separate charges: first-degree murder, 2 counts of theft, and abuse of a corpse because he put Jennifer's body into a trash compactor. The defense came forward, though, with multiple reasons why Michael couldn't possibly be guilty. They said that the neighbor and the neighbor's daughter were being stalked, and maybe the stalker killed the wrong mother and daughter. They also said that there was no murder weapon to be found anywhere. This gun that shot Jennifer was nowhere to be found anywhere. They also argued that there was absolutely no motive whatsoever. And I will admit, this is a very difficult case because a lot of this stuff is circumstantial evidence. Obviously they can't really check for his DNA on anything because his DNA would have been there to begin with. So it was a whole bunch of circumstantial information they were hoping would really ride them through to get a guilty verdict. But the prosecution had really pulled together a lot of information that proved that the marriage was going bad, and Michael was likely angry about it. Jennifer's mom testified against Michael at the trial, saying that at one point Jennifer told her Michael was incredibly drunk one night and choked her. It was just apparent from all the different witnesses that came forward that he was very violent towards his wife, and their marriage was anything but the happy one that it seemed to be to a good handful of people close to them. They also were able to put his grieving father act into question. He basically pulled a publicity stunt. He wanted the media to see him as one way to avoid looking guilty, and they caught him doing it. As I said earlier, he had been looking for condos, looking for houses. He said that he couldn't live in the house anymore because it made him uncomfortable. He bought both Jennifer and Abby tons and tons of Christmas presents, but when authorities checked, those presents were never for Abby and Jennifer. They were expensive items that he had bought for himself. He bought almost $5,500 worth of entertainment equipment, including a big screen TV, a surround sound package, a nice new computer, a nice new modem. It was a giant lie and a giant act. None of that was the truth. This act he'd been putting on, that he was so upset and doing things in hopes they would come home, he was really buying all these things for himself. And that is not a sign of a grieving father or husband. After 12 hours of deliberation on April 16th, 2004, Michael was found guilty of murdering his own wife and was sentenced to life in prison. From 2005 to 2013, his lawyers repeatedly attempted to request a new trial. They argued so many different things. They had an argument that one of the jurors had been legally blind, so there was no way they could have seen the evidence. They also said there was insufficient evidence, and it was just one thing after another. They fought hard to get Michael a new trial, and eventually they got way too lucky, in my personal opinion. An original juror testified about being a victim of domestic violence, something that she had not originally been honest about on her juror questionnaire. And after being spoken to, she basically lied about it so she had a better chance at getting a seat as a juror. This, for obvious reasons, made her biased. Because of this, by June of 2014, Michael's murder conviction was completely thrown out. But the Colorado Supreme Court granted an emergency stay because no one was really convinced that he wasn't guilty of Jennifer's murder. And this emergency stay would keep him in prison until his brand new trial. Now, the trial started in 2017, so not even that long ago, and this is for a murder that happened in 2001, and Michael, of course, pled not guilty. His attorneys were so incredibly desperate to keep him out of jail that they even tried to claim there was another suspect, and they named a sexual predator in Canada. But this is wildly inappropriate to do when you are just an attorney and you do not have any proof against someone and it's obvious pure speculation. You can't just throw somebody's name out in the middle of a trial claiming that they are actually the guilty one. So obviously the judge quickly shut this down and said, do not take it there, take a seat. That is inappropriate. But despite all the effort from his defense attorneys, the trial did not go in his favor at all again. After 5 weeks, for the second time in April of 2018 after 17 hours of deliberation. Michael, for the second time, was found guilty of the murder of his wife, abuse of a corpse, and the 2 counts of theft. And he was sentenced again to life in prison, except this time without the possibility of parole. Michael's family still strongly stood by his side. They were with him through the entire trial, and they said there's absolutely no way he would ever hurt Jennifer or Abby, and they knew that there was no way that he was guilty. But Jennifer and Abby's family said that it was absolute hell having to go through the trial all over again. They felt like they had, justice for at least one of their loved ones in 2004 when he was first sentenced, but, now they had to go through it all over again. And to this day, Michael still denies having any involvement whatsoever in his wife's death or in Abby's disappearance and or death. And here we are still to this day. Jennifer has the most justice she possibly could get, but there is nothing at all happening really for Abby. There was no sign of blood in the house that belonged to Abby. There was no sign of blood in the van that belonged to Abby. Her remains were never found in the landfill. Her bed had been neatly made, so she had gotten up that morning to prepare to go to school, but the clothes that she had laid out for her were still neatly folded when authorities came to check the house. There was no sign of a struggle or any issue at all in her room. Her book bag was still in the hallway. There was no sign of what happened to her. No blood, no nothing. She could be dead. She could be alive. She could have run away. He could have hid her somewhere. There's just no telling. And despite almost 20 years of searching, there's no answers at all. And where Abby is, there's no justice for whatever might have happened to her. It had been decided that no charges were going to be placed on Michael for Abby's disappearance and possible murder, because they didn't want it to fail. They were already really relying on a lot of circumstantial evidence to prove that he was guilty of Jennifer's murder, but there was nothing at all to prove he was connected to Abby's murder other than the fact that Abby might have been with her mom and might have been a witness to whatever happened to her mom. They didn't want the charges against Michael for any involvement in Abby's disappearance or murder to fail, and then them later find the body and not be able to charge him again at all. Authorities believe it's very likely that Abby was never meant to be harmed at all. They think it's more likely that she woke up to her mother being killed and ended up as a victim because of something she saw or, some way she tried to possibly help her mom. Some believe it's also possible that he put her in a place that was special to him. He likely put Jennifer in the trash because that's what he thought of her at that moment. She wanted to leave him. She wanted nothing to do with him. He wanted to throw her away, basically. But he might have done something a bit more along the lines of a burial for Abby if he is involved in her possible murder. If the car the woman saw was in fact the family's car, that leaves miles and miles of just open wilderness and difficult terrain that she could have possibly been buried at. So I have no idea if they have searched this area. I'm sure obviously they have. I just can't personally find anything to confirm it. But it's heartbreaking. It's such a difficult situation when there's possibly 2 different circumstances for people kind of involved in the same incident. And I feel like society kind of got this satisfaction from having answers with Jennifer that a lot of people forgot there's no answers for Abby. She was an innocent 6-year-old little girl that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and everyone's just kind of forgotten about it. And I was going through my different suggestions and I came across this one and looked it up, and it absolutely broke my heart because I read the story. I was not expecting at the end of it to hear that Abby was still missing and there were still no answers. And when I saw that, I tried to do as many searches as possible, and there's just nothing out there keeping her story alive. Her family is still hurting, not knowing what happened to her. At this point, if Michael was involved, and I say it that way because we don't know, but based on the given circumstances, it's pretty dang likely. I think it's absolutely sick that he won't say anything. He's been in prison now for almost 20 years, and he won't give up what he did with his daughter. He won't give up what happened to her. There are so many different possibilities. You know, there is no evidence that she was killed, none at all. So she could be out there alive. There's nothing to shut down that idea whatsoever. Just because he killed Jennifer does not necessarily mean he killed Abby. He might have given her to someone that can take care of her. He might have known he'd get caught. He'd known that he wouldn't be able to take care of her anymore. So maybe he handed her off to someone. But again, you always have to consider the opposite, that he did do something to her. And I just think it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I know that his family is protecting him, but I really, really hope that they realize the possibilities that are out there and they come to face with the reality that it is possible that he did something to Abby. And maybe they have information that would benefit authorities, you know, places that were special to him and Abby, maybe places that he would take her. I just don't want Abby's story to die. She was 6 years old, you guys, 6 years old. I have a 5-year-old that's about to turn 6. It makes my stomach turn. So please, if you can, share her picture, share the story. There's so many different links down below with information you can share on her, from the Charlie Project to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There are so many different flyers and things that you can share to keep her story alive. I actually know a lot of you guys are from Colorado. I learned that when I did the Nathaniel Holmes video. And I know that a lot of people in Colorado are really outdoorsy people and they go hiking and are all the time outside. So if you are ever in this area, just keep your eye out and be very, very aware. But on that note, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and go. I want to thank you so much for listening to today's story and for helping me keep Abby's story in particular alive. So please, please share this wherever you guys can. And I know you will. You're all absolutely incredible. Please don't forget, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button down below so we can hopefully bring them home together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.